Uncommon is a production by Neuralle, a full-service digital agency. If you want to grow with a premium agency and have the ability to work with Jordan directly, then learn more at neuralle.com/media and request a callback. That's neuralle.com/media.
My name's Jordan Michaelides and I'm the host of Uncommon, a show that asks the why on business, current affairs, media and sport. If you like this episode, do of course like and subscribe. This will help the YouTube algorithm work out whether you like this type of content. To find all previous guests, just head to neuralle.com/uncommon. For podcast audio, search Uncommon on all your good podcast apps, including Apple Podcasts and Spotify. For social, keep up to date with behind the scenes at uncommon_show. With all that being said, let's get into the episode. My guests this week, Alex Wadelton, WAD doctor, as I saw some comments on Mumbrella articles from 6 or 7 years ago, independent creative, co-author of The Right Brain Workout, co-creator of the Nicky Winmar statue that we all know. I'm a big fan of it. Obviously, St Kilda supporter. The Future Landfill Project, and former creative director at many agencies, including McCann, DDB, GPY&R, Zoo Group, and the Shannon Company. I was trying to dig some dirt. Like I said before we got started, you're quite squeaky clean. It was really, really interesting to find that old article about, I think it was the GPY&R Sydney, where you won the press lion in Cannes for wagon wheels.
Yep.
And just looking at the comments was super interesting. Does the WAD doctor still exist as a nickname?
I sometimes get WAD dog.
WAD dog?
WAD dog or
Watto?
Or I get my kids to call me Captain Awesome. I try to, it never works. It's not worked once. We'll get there. I get the WAD doctor sometimes. Yeah.
Yeah. I thought that was super interesting. Did and as well with Nono's most connected car, how did that go with the sale?
Well, it sold really quickly, so that was good, and it got some press out of it. Mainly the idea behind that was just to get people to stop and think that everything, like even the coffee that you're drinking now, that coffee cup it's probably got 3,000 people's brains to deliver that to you to drink for us to ignore. So it's just interesting how we're also like Kevin Bacon, all that sort of stuff. Just everything's pretty amazing if you stop and think about it. Yeah.
Do you you got to think about someone who is a bit of an ideas man in yourself. There must be sort of like an inherent ability that you may have noticed as a kid. I guess I was curious, like, is there an early memory you have as a kid being intrigued by ideas at all?
Not really. I mean, my dad is a creative director in advertising. And I do remember in year 7 or 8 or something, he got a brief and he asked for my opinion, and I came up with an idea, and they actually presented it to the client, and it didn't get up. But I was just like, oh, that wasn't that hard.
What was the brief?
It was for the Australian road toll for something like that. It was about that. So some laws around that. I can't remember the specific around it, but it was a social good type thing, a governmental type thing. And they presented the idea. I think it was, what's that song? We're on the road to nowhere. Who's that by? I've forgotten who that's by, but that was the idea. It was like basically we're on the road to nowhere was kind of the idea behind it. And they actually talked to the writer of the song, and he was like, yeah, I'll do it for the amount of money. But the client didn't buy it. So yeah.
That must have been a proud dad moment for him.
Yeah, probably.
Did so you think on that basis that you were always sort of destined and it rubbed off you that you were going to go into media? Yeah,
I just think what's good about advertising, you can kind of just think of ideas all the time. And there's lots of them. It's always something new and people can see them because it's, I kind of say sometimes it's almost the easy bit is coming up with the idea, but it's the making it. That's the hard bit, and that's the most exciting bit when you see it out in the world and people like it and stuff. So I've always kind of liked being able to hopefully affect people in a positive manner. So, yeah.
Was there any lessons like growing up that you sort of learned principle-wise from either of your parents? And it might have been something that they said directly or
No, I can't
indirectly.
really. No, I can't really remember. It's probably just by osmosis.
Yeah.
I've just always been interested in coming up with ideas. Maybe not necessarily being a great artist or anything like that, but just ideas are exciting, I think.
Yeah. What did you think you were going to be as a kid? Like, did you have like these ideas of certain careers before?
Yeah, I was going to be a paleontologist because I love dinosaurs.
Really?
How cool are dinosaurs when you're a kid? Then I was going to be full forward for Geelong. Neither of those worked out. But yeah, just sort of, I like a lot of people in advertising, you kind of just sort of half stumble into it. Like, I sort of did okay in school, not amazing, but then I was just sort of working in bars and nightclubs. I started a graphic design course and sort of didn't really get that jazzed about that. Then I started an arts course and again, sort of wasn't that excited about it. And then I just applied for an RMIT advertising course, a TAFE course. So I did that for 2 years. I don't know if it still exists anymore. Don't know. Do we still do TAFE in Victoria?
Yeah. Oh, for sure. I feel like, but whether they're like, it might be like creative writing now.
Yeah. I feel like it's maybe changed. So I did that for 2 years, and that got me straight into the university, the second year of the university course on advertising, which was more specific to creative. And I did that for about 6 months, and I was just like, I'm not learning anything here. I'd rather just try and get a job. So I dropped out while everyone else finished the course. I didn't get a job for ages because I was just working in nightclubs and bars and stuff, and I just basically kept knocking on people's doors, and eventually someone opened the door and let me in.
Yeah. What were the nightclubs of choice?
Milk Bar. I was head bussing at Milk Bar nightclub. Does anyone remember that? Above the olive tree in South Melbourne.
Oh my God.
Yeah, classic place.
Yeah, so we were talking about clubs with not a former employee. Like recently, she was in like lockdown, having come back from New Zealand. I was talking to her about like the clubs that she heads to these days, and sort of revisiting things like Boutique. I remember when Boutique was like the pinnacle, the pinnacle of night clubbing in Melbourne. All right, so you basically did high school at Caulfield.
Mm-hmm.
So you went into this TAFE course.
Yep.
Explain to me how. So I've read here that, or at least on LinkedIn, which is always super handy, is you finished in 97. And I didn't write the year that you started at AdTown, but you spent 4 years there. Explain that time in between.
In between starting at AdTown?
RMIT and starting at AdTown.
Oh, well, yeah, that was, working in nightclubs. Yeah, it was basically being a bussy and doing stuff like that and working on my folio during the day.
Yeah.
And sort of trying to see people. And then at night, basically, working, serving.
How did AdTown come about?
Me and the guy, Ant Simmons, who's now a CD at Clemenger, we both dropped out at the same time. We thought, let's go get a job. And so we both sort of started knocking on doors, and we were walking through the city one day and we saw an orange banner in Little Collins Street that said AdTown, and we went, it has ad in the title. Maybe it's an advertising agency. Let's go inside, basically. And we went inside and said, "Oh, we're young, creative people. Would anyone here be interested in hiring us?" Basically, and that was we got names and numbers from Fish Rutherford, and Ken Gray. They were the two CDs there. And they said, "Oh, well, maybe come and bring your folio in." So we actually brought our folio in. And they said, "We haven't got anything going at the moment, but we'll keep you in mind." So, which is what they always say. And then months and months passed. Ant went back to the course, so he went and finished the course. I stayed and didn't. And then one day I got a phone call from Ken Gray saying, "We want to hire you as an art director." And I said, "Oh, should I get Ant to come in as well?" And they're like, No, we're just interested in you. So I got given the gig through that as an art director on Brushes.
Wow.
The now defunct Brushes. But that was my first job, working on catalogs for Brushes.
Art director, what skills did you have on that side? Because it sounded like most of what you were doing was on the copywriting side.
Well, most of the stuff now I do, but I'm always being able to sort of do a bit of everything. Like I can I can use all Photoshop and InDesign, well, Quark Express back then. But I've always been interested in, if you can't think visually as a copywriter, your stuff. So I can sort of do a bit of everything. So I was just happy to get a job, but I knew I wanted to be a writer. But this is a good job. It's really good actually working on retail because you have to work really fast and make quick decisions.
Yeah.
So it was kind of good discipline. So yeah, I just think it's important to be able to do lots of things. Yeah.
Well, it's really interesting if you go through your entire career up to now. I mean, there's so many different places you've worked in. I think the commonality amongst all of it that you sort of emphasize is not the role per se, but the ideas that you came up with.
Yep.
You know, like some of these includes the Works campaign. I knew that big time, obviously being in high school at Officeworks. Wrigley's was another big one, the Food Creatures campaign. The other one is that I noticed was Dumb Ways to Die. I don't know if you came up with that or if you just worked on that campaign.
Just worked on that, yep.
But yeah, that was the commonality amongst all of your career stuff. And I guess I was intrigued, when did you realize you were good at it? How long into this did you realize that you had the ability to craft good ideas?
I don't know. I just think I just kept doing it and I didn't really think about it. I just was interested in just coming up with stuff. So I never really thought about it, to be honest. Yeah. I haven't really actually thought about it when I thought I was good. Well, every time I get a brief, I'm thinking, oh no, I'm going to get found out. So the old imposter syndrome is alive and well.
So you've never had like one of those moments at the end of a campaign when you're like, oh, that was good. I did good.
No, not really. I just always, that probably, as you can tell from my LinkedIn profile as well, like I haven't really stayed in places for super long. Haven't been at a place for 10, 15 years like some people, probably because I just have a super short attention span, which is probably why I'm interested in lots of different things, and I've come up with ideas on lots of different angles and charities and things, because I've always trying to find what's the next thing to move on to, what's the next thing I can not know anything about that I can learn about, because it's as you say, as we always say, like if you stop learning, then what's the point? I never want to be the smartest person in the room. I'm always out asking questions about new stuff, always interested in new stuff. And that's also what's good about advertising. Like I said,
I was going to say, I think that's definitely an industry mentality. I was trying to think of it the other day. Why is the average time at a company so low for people? Like I think I was reading it was like 18 months or something like that, the average turnover. And it makes sense, particularly on the creative side, because creatives, are less conscientious and more focused on ideas, if that makes sense. And so the best ideas will attract them. So if they're at a place and things become stale, then it makes sense. You would want to go find the next best ideas.
Yeah, I think it's if you keep getting the same brief over and over again, you pump. But I don't know if it's less conscientious, because I often think that creatives people are the most deadline oriented, want to get things done people going, because they just want to make stuff and make it happen. And like I'm personally with me, I'm always just, every time I come up with an idea, I'm like, oh my God, this is going to be amazing. I'm so emotionally attached to it. And then like 99.9% of ideas, they completely go nowhere, and you can just devastated every time. I'm still devastated when something doesn't happen. Don't know why, but I'm always like, I'll dust myself off. Let's come up with something even better next time. And, it's always, trying to find that next challenge is always exciting.
I remember having a conversation actually with a former guest, Ethan, who now runs July Luggage. And he came from the advertising game, and he said that the thing that really pushed him out of it was actually the fact, what you just mentioned before, when you would pitch these ideas and you've invested all this time and emotion into it and they don't get through with the client, or you don't win the opportunity, the retainer, the job, the project, whatever it may be. But like I almost was, not then at the time, but I thought in my head, like the argument against that is that that's what allows you to pitch those ideas, is the passion.
Yep.
So have you ever felt like I don't know what it is, like not a frustration, but a feeling like you would get burnt out with the industry from that?
1,000%, 10 times more than yes. Like it's just that's why I became a freelancer, because I was like being stuck in an agency and all the politics and everything. My whole happiness used to be based on getting great ideas up and made. And then I was, winning awards. It's still miserable because if you win an award one week, there's another award show the week after. And if you've won like a silver, it's not as good as someone who's won a gold. If you've won a gold, it's not as good as someone who's won the Grand Prix. If you win a Grand Prix, it's not as good as the guy who won the titanium. And it's just this never-ending competitive thing. So I kind of just went, I need to stop basing my happiness on my work, on my paid work. So that's when I started to activate all these sort of side projects. So I've always had all these side ideas and never done anything with them. And you just can't do them when you're in an agency. Well, I felt I couldn't, because you're working 60 hours a week. And it's so intense in an agency. By the time you get home, you're just like, I'm done. No more ideas.
That's interesting. Like if you were to become an agency owner, how would you think about preventing that burnout? Because this is something that I think about in a new young agency is, and you look at tech companies and the way they integrate things like Google's got like spend 20% of your time on projects you're passionate about.
Yep.
So I guess I'm curious, like if you logically were opening a business and allowing people to prevent that burnout, how would you think about it?
I would say 4 days a week and spend that day doing stuff for yourself. Definitely. Okay. But as a side thing, I would never open an agency myself. I'm having too much fun having none of those responsibilities and just making things happen and trying to get projects up on the go. So, but I'd say to a lot of young kids, if you need to find the time for yourself. Don't base all your efforts in your day-to-day job, because you need to have things that you can personally have passion for.
Yeah.
And now because of the internet, if you have that passion and a great idea, you can make stuff happen, which is really exciting, which probably you couldn't do 15, 20 years ago, but you can now. Like everyone can attach themselves to an amazing worldwide cause, and you don't even need to have a client. If you just want to do something that you're passionate about, just make it happen. And, I just think that's really exciting. And if I was running a company, I'd say you need to have that time. You need to do that. In fact, if you don't do that, I'm going to be asking, what's wrong with you?
No, because that's something that my co-founder and I, creative director, were talking about is, I mean, it's hard now when we're as young as we are and as new as we are. But I remember putting it in our handbook and saying, like, I want staff to have a day to work on things they're passionate about. And she's like, you can't do that right now because things are still young. But, there's definitely some room in there for that. And even if you align it with stuff that's being done internally at the agency, there's definitely a way for people to get, I don't know. I find that having been in large corporates, burnout is like a massive, massive issue. And it's something
so much
that you've
pressure.
got to work against. Yeah. It's just constant pressure. There's always work. Like there will never not be work, if that makes sense. I feel like it's just got to make time for it.
Yeah. Well, it's also, I feel like particularly in all big agencies, like it's so much of a grind of so many hours, but the work that you're trying to do is trying to appeal to people. So if you don't have a life outside of advertising, you're going to be doing ads to ad people, and that's the worst sort of advertising, because what's the point? Like it's like I've won all these awards. The only award that anyone ever cares about outside of advertising is the Gruen Award.
Yeah.
It's the only award my kids care about, is the one that's the plastic thing, and that's the best one because it's outside of an advertising forum where people are just so focused on ads and what has and hasn't been done. If you just do stuff that's, like I say to young creatives, I say aim for achievements, not awards, because achievements last forever. Awards are like, they're one every 3 weeks.
Yeah.
But if you like the Nicky Winmar statue, like that's going to last, it's been built, it'll last for 1,000 years. Like potentially it'll stand there longer than the stadium. The stadium will be knocked down a few times and the Nicky Winmar statue will still be there, which is much more exciting to me than having a statue that's 6 inches tall that you may have in an office.
No, I would agree with that. Is that how you originally thought of the Nicky Winmar campaign?
Yeah, I mean, it was interesting, like when it actually got unveiled, which was just an amazing moment. It was kind of around the same time as the Cannes Advertising Awards. And so my LinkedIn was full of people talking about so humbled and honored to win this silver, win this gold at Cannes. And I'm like, I only got a bronze, but it's a 10-foot high bronze statue of one of the most amazing moments in history, which is cool. But it's hard because, being raised in advertising, it's so competitive. And even then I feel like I was comparing myself to people, and I really, really am working so hard to stop doing that, because as soon as you're comparing yourself to people, you're just becoming potentially negative or more high and mighty than someone. And that's not good. You just need to do the right thing, You
start feeding your ego more than, like, I think, the biggest thing to come out of the self-help world in the last few years is focusing on improvements in, like, comparisons to yourself from yesterday.
Yep.
Because the biggest thing in the past generations, and particularly in our parents' generation, is looking at themselves against others. How big is your house? How nice is your car? All these sort of things that necessarily don't make you feel great in the long run.
Yeah. I listened to this podcast called Secular Buddhism. Don't know if you've heard of it, but it's really great. And they have some really good things. And I think there was one thing where he was talking about, Noah Rochette is the host, he's talking about there was a little study done where they had a picture of 3 kids, and there was a kid in the middle who was smiling, and the 2 kids either side of the smiling kid were unhappy, were frowning. And so they took this picture and took it to Western kids and showed it to them and said, is that kid in the middle happy? And most of the Western kids are like, of course, he's smiling. Of course he's happy. But you take it to Eastern culture and they're like, is the kid in the middle happy? And they're like, he can't be because his friends aren't happy. I just think that it is an interesting way of looking at the world, like how Western society is all about making ourselves happy. But if we can do something that helps other people feel like, how much better does that be? Instead of just one person being happy, you could make 3 people, 5 people, 1,000 people feel better about themselves, and that's going to make you feel better anyway. So why don't we just do that? Why don't we help other people to help ourselves as well in a way? So trying to put the ego back and just trying to take care of people feels like that's the right thing to do. Particularly, I mean, what's happening in the world with COVID and stuff, it's so fighting each other over bloody tissue rolls and toilet paper and stuff. We need to get back to how we were when the bushfires were, and we were so open with trying to help people. Yeah. That's a much better vibe to be putting into the world, I reckon.
Yeah, the psychology on COVID is super interesting. We'll jump into right brain workout in a sec. I guess I'm curious from your perspective, you've been working from home, nothing much in terms of the way that you're working has changed. The kids are home now more, obviously. How do you perceive this whole thing? I mean, I could ask you for sound grabs, but, I guess I'm curious as to what do you think the next few months looks like? Do you feel that life will change quicker as opposed to this being some drawn out thing? What's sort of your overall gut feel on where things are going at the moment?
I feel like when the restrictions come down, within a few weeks, it'll just be back to exactly how it was. It just feels like that. I feel like there is a big opportunity for it to not go that way, but I just think people default to what they're used to. So it is an interesting time. Like I've found it interesting, like as a freelancer, like a lot of agencies, bigger agencies in the past, when they said, can you come into the office? I'm like, no, I work from home. I work from Burundara Library in the Mills and Boon section. And they're like, no, you need to come in. I'm like, no, I work better when I've sort of organised myself. And they're like, no, we can't have you in. But then they were all forced to do it. I think a lot of companies saw it's actually really, really sometimes really good for creative people because, in a creative agency, you don't have an office anymore. But to think of stuff, you need to have some time where you're not distracted and you're not disturbed and you're just sometimes piss farting around, but doing it in your own mind you need that space. You just don't get that in an agency anymore. Like I know a lot of great creatives I work with, when they want to go think of ideas, they have to get out of the agency. They just can't do it. So I'm wondering if that might actually be beneficial for creative agencies to have this time where people have been working from home. We might get the office back. Yeah. that would be a good change.
That to me has been it sort of accelerated things that were already happening. Yeah, I've been really fascinated by studies where they they've mic'd up common areas or common desk seating areas to closed offices and looked at productivity. And in a lot of cases, I feel like Apple in their workplaces hit the nail on the head. You've got closed areas for teams or individuals and then common areas for wider groups. So it gives that space for people to get deep work done.
Yeah.
But also cross-pollinate ideas across different teams.
Yep.
So, yeah, I feel like people are going to be, commercial real estate's got a bit of a reckoning coming, I think, in the next year.
Yeah.
I remember when was the first lockdown? It was March to mid-May. I remember it's because it sort of crossed over near my birthday. And about a week or so after, we went to go look at new office space. Because at the moment, we're still working out of a studio just on the side of my house in East Melbourne. And people, I don't know, like commercial real estate people are just delusional as to like pricing of rent and all that. And it was just like, I remember one was like in the center of the city was like $3,000 for 20 square meters or something ridiculous, like barely enough space for two or three people.
Yeah.
And it didn't include all your other things like utilities and stuff like that. So yeah, I think, I feel like the biggest thing that's going to happen from this is the way that we work. How many of us in agency land are going to, I guess, allow creatives to be purely based at home and then come in for common time or common areas in the workplace? That'll be quite interesting.
Yeah, just coming in when you need to, not just being there all the time and being stuck in traffic for an hour every morning to and from work. It's just such a waste of time and just gets people stressed out before they actually have to do work. And when I sometimes go into an office, I'm so much less productive than when I am in my own space. Like it's night and day.
Well, it was really interesting chatting to Dan at the start of that COVID series that we did of these online interviews. And he was telling me like it felt weird for him as a manager of people just not being in the office. It sort of made him realize like, okay, this is really what I'm spending my day doing, which would give you some time to pause and reflect, I guess.
Yeah, I guess it depends on the role you have, because if you're like in account service, you probably need to have meetings and talking to clients and stuff. But as a creative, you just need your own space. But I've always, a lot of the time I just work on my own. I'm not like a mid-weight creative team who have to be a writer and art director and all that bouncing it. Because I've always been like, if I could just work on my own, that'd be ideal.
That'd be the best scenario.
Yeah, exactly. So I've been social distancing my whole life. So this is nothing new for me.
So 2016, you were the 16th most awarded copywriter in the world, highest ranked in Australia, I think. Now, obviously independent for about 2 years. How similar is it to being in an agency, and how different is it to being in an agency?
It's completely different to being in an agency. I'm so much happier because I was never good at the politics bit, and I couldn't hide my disdain for people who I thought were not doing the right thing. So I can now be on my high and mighty horse on my own and not offend anybody. It's so much better. I've got so much time to do all the other things that I'm really passionate about, which just couldn't do in an agency. So I'm really finding it like chalk and cheese. I'm just like, and I love cheese, so that's good. And I get to have a lot of cheese every day, probably too much nowadays.
What's sort of the highs and lows of working for yourself now?
Well, I guess the highs is being able to do lots of all those different things and having the time to pour passion into some of the things like Nicky Widmar, Future Landfill, the book, setting up a podcast. I've got all these other projects on the go at the moment. And the lows is like when COVID hit, for a month, there was just no work whatsoever at all. So that was not ideal. But because of that, I went I've got time now to activate a whole bunch of other things. So I started making other things. So I guess turn those bads into a good.
Well, one of those was the podcast. What's your assessment on the format so far, or the medium so far now that you've started creating yourself?
Yeah, I mean, I like just chatting to interesting people. So that's why I'm happy, loving having a chat with you about this. I just like talking to people about creativity because the podcast is all about just talking to people about creativity and how to be more creative, just to help people who maybe think they're not creative when all the research says that we are all creative, but we just lose it. We get it all taught out of us as we become adults, which is a bit sad.
Yeah.
And as we know, with robots and AI coming, we kind of need to stay ahead of that. And that humanness of creativity is our key differentiator from everything else. So, yeah, I think it's really interesting. Yeah.
I notice. I feel like that microphone looks new, and it made me think like, has he got GAS yet, which is gear acquisition syndrome?
No. I'm not a big tech. No, this is.
No?
Yeah, I did the first few, and it sounded like I was in a bathtub inside the Titanic. So I thought I better get something that makes me sound less like an idiot.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's going good.
One thing, I don't know if Dan's teasing me or sort of complimenting. Every time he comes in for a new interview each year or every 9 months or whenever it is, we've gotten some new equipment that makes the production value just go that little bit higher.
Yeah. It all looks beautiful.
It's a problem, but also like it is very fun.
Yeah.
When you get into this space, like all the cool different things that you can get into. Where do you sort of see the podcast going? How do you want to develop it? Has your perspective changed since you started it?
Yeah, I've just started interviewing people who are in non-creative roles, getting their perspective, who think they're in non-creative roles, and trying to help people realize that they are creative. And I've also got a few different formats. I actually did one yesterday, which was quite funny, where I just asked questions from the Right Brain Workout. It's just because I do a section on the podcast where I ask a question from the book, and the answers are always like amazing. So I thought, wouldn't it be interesting to do that just as a whole episode, just asking these questions? So I had a creative director, a novelist, and a comedian on yesterday, just answering these questions, and it was hilarious. So I've actually got grand designs to maybe develop that into a TV show or something. So I'm sort of going to try that a few different ways, because it's just funny. Like I kind of, what was the little sub? I had like it's the only game show where there's no wrong answer, so everyone wins. So that's what's good about creativity. Like you can't get it wrong. You just come up with stuff and just go for it. You know.
Well, that had me thinking, because I was like, how could he take this format from here? I mean, the obvious thing is obviously with this book, you just finished the second edition, so I think the questions have been updated. For those who haven't seen it or read it, it's essentially a book that has around 70 questions that you and Russell, Russell Howcroft have sort of crafted to, I guess, push back at this supposed creative deficit in Australia. I mean, some of the questions are golden, like if clay was discovered to be a new superfood, what would it be renamed for consumers? And it had me thinking, like, wouldn't it be interesting if he was just doing like a vox pop or like a door stopping thing down on like South Bank, like back when things are back to normal, you know, and you're just sort of walking down and you just go jump in front of people and just ask them these random questions and see what the initial response would be.
Yeah,
I'd love to see something like that.
I actually asked that question yesterday on the show, because what's interesting about the book as well, which is not just me and Russell come up with questions. Every question's written by a different creative person. And so you can read the question and then you can flick to the back of the book and see who wrote that question, which is kind of, it can almost psychoanalyze the question. You can psychoanalyze the person who wrote it, because like a sound person has often written a question about sound, or art director's written about design, or it's, it's just interesting to get all these different creative people to write questions. And just people can come up with creativity when they don't think they're creative, and they are, which is really awesome. People need to realize that. It's
really interesting, because I just read, I'd never read it, but because I'd never been in the industry, but a fellow agency owner said you have to read the copybook. I don't know if you've ever seen that. I think it's by Tashins. I've got that on my
shelf just over there. Yep.
Brilliant book. And all it is really just like a combination of thoughts from some of the best like creative directors and writers in the industry.
Yep.
And it makes a lot of sense. You sort of crowdsourcing a really good idea for a book, if you think about it. Why do you think it was necessary to write the book? What made you think I've got to do this thing?
Because I see the creativity in my kids, and I see so many people who you can just tell they don't think they're creative. Like people say, "Oh, I'm not creative." Like that's their first reaction when you talk about creativity. And I feel like looking at the top 4 exports that Australia have. It's all stuff being pulled out of the ground, and that's obviously got a finite life. And we're going to be, as a country, we'll be left behind if we're not creative. And I just also think creativity is fun. We need more fun in our life. Like we're so analytical. We've got mortgages to go. We've got bills to pay. Don't do that. Don't do it this way. We need more freedom and more joy in our life. And that's why I like about creativity beyond commercial creativity and just pure creativity is that it can just be anything. And you can create something that has never been created ever anywhere in the universe. How amazing is that? And you can do it like that. So the book was just to help prompt people to reconnect with that and have that bit of extra joy and put some positive vibes into the world. That was also half the reason. I just thought we need some good vibes in the world and just people doing a bit of mindfulness as well. That's why we did it as a book first up, because it even says get a pen or a pencil. So you have to actually go old school. You can't, you know what I mean? Yeah, and because there's all the research around if you write something down, it has a stronger effect on your brain. Yeah. So there's lots of reasons. So Russell Howcroft, who you mentioned, he actually did a speech about Australia needing a creativity commission because of all those reasons. So I basically just said to Russell, because he used to be a boss of mine back in the day, and I just kept hassling him until we had breakfast, and I actually got like sample copies of the book printed to show to him, and he was like, "Oh, I love this!" And within a week, we're the CEO of Penguin signing a book deal, which is pretty cool. So because it just felt as soon as people hold the book, they go, "Oh, this is cool," and I just think it just felt like we needed something like that. So So it's a problem that like a lot of different people I've spoken to are very aware of, and I feel like, you know, obviously government is a bureaucracy that takes generations or decades to catch up to where the general economy and the public is. I feel like COVID though has really accelerated the idea that Australia is really way too reliant on outside sources. And as putting this topic like front and center. And so there's many different ways that people are approaching it. It sort of seems that you guys, with the knowledge that you have, have approached the problem in the way that you can start to, you know, fix it in some way. And that is by being creative and literally creating a book. Yeah, little by little, you know, little by little. It's no silver bullet, but if we just can keep saying creativity is important, which it is, because I mean everything that we all interact with every day is being created with creativity. Like the microphone, the computers, it's all super creative people have come up with these things. It's not just, you know, doing numbers and being serious about things. It's all created through play and joy and trying to solve a problem or coming up with new ways of thinking. That's what humans do. That's why we keep doing new things, because we are never happy. We always want to move on to the next thing. We always want to move forward, because, you know, you look at a koala, they're pretty happy just sitting up there, getting stoned on gum leaves every day, but we're not happy with that. We want to move forward and do new things, and that's all through creativity. It's all of it through creativity, which can be fed by data and all those, you know, analytical things, but it's always is the output is creativity that moves humanity forward. So let's do more of that.
I speaking of creativity, I've been intrigued to learn about your creative principles. I mean, we've the last few weeks we've onboarded some new staff, and I've had more time now because I don't have to focus as much time on sales, thinking harder about strategy, ideas, and the like. You know, principally, what are our principles for the agency? What makes us different? You know, you look at someone like Hard Hat, and it's about persuasion, and then you look at other agencies and think about like a King Kong, which has sort of just come onto the space, and it's all about direct sales. That's their whole shtick. I guess for you, where do you see your difference in principles? What makes Alex Wadelton Alex?
Just doing good things for good people is my sort of thing, because I've worked with a lot of amazingly creative people in my career, and some of them have not been amazingly great people. Okay. So I no longer work with those people who aren't amazingly great people. Okay. And I think I want to do stuff that always has a benefit, for a positive benefit for the world, rather than just selling some chips or something. I'm going to do something that hopefully contributes positively to society, because that's my thing. So I basically just do social good projects now because I'm passionate about that, and it pays enough money for me to have the time to do all my other social good projects, which don't pay me any money, but I love. So just trying to do stuff that, like I said, aiming for achievements that are good for the world rather than just winning awards and stuff. Is kind of my thing.
What do you think crystallized that opinion? Was there a particular client, project, event in your life that really made you think that way? Yeah,
there was, when I was at an agency, Cummins and Partners, they had a sports betting account. And I'd say nothing necessarily that wrong with sports betting, but when I got the brief, the proposition that was read out was, it's better to bet and lose than to not bet at all. And I'm like, I don't know if that's necessarily a great proposition to be putting out into the world. Like, that's a great vibe. Like, I don't think it's actually better to bet and lose than not bet at all. I think that's and I was just like, actually made my blood boil, and nobody else in the brief could see my point, which is fine. They're allowed to have their own opinion, but I was just like, are you serious? Like,
so no one in the agency, no one on the client side or anything?
Well,
like that?
I never met the client because I said, I'm not working on this brief. Wow. Because that is an evil proposition. So you can do a sports betting brief, but I'm not going to do something where it's basically saying it's better to lose money than to not lose money, which I think is just bad. So I just slowly, bit by bit, I sort of started coming up against things like that. And I was just like, I need to do something that is doing positive stuff for the world. And I just worked at a small agency, which wasn't going great. So I just started to do my own thing because I was like, I'm tired of doing stuff. Even the stuff that I would sometimes do, like one of the first things I did just off my own bat was this thing called $1 $1 Pluck. I don't know if you've heard of that. Basically,
rings a bell.
It was for camp quality because my son has a lot of allergies. So we spent a lot of time in hospital. He's like anaphylactic to wheat, rye, barley and nuts and all these sort of things. So we'd be in hospital a lot. And it was like 3:00 in the morning at the Royal Children's one day. And I was feeling sorry for myself, going, it's so unfair that our son has got this, me and my wife, our son has got all these allergies. And then I saw a mum wheeling along the like 6-year-old kid with no hair and like a 30-centimetre scar on the head. And I'm like, well, at least it's not brain cancer. Like, we can manage the allergies. So I just had this idea in my head at that time, literally at that moment. It's like I could do this thing called $1 $1 Pluck, where for every hair, every dollar someone donated, I'd pluck one hair out of my head. And I thought I'd do it for camp quality because a few years earlier, my son they'd been trying to get blood out of him when he was like 10 months old. And out of nowhere, someone from camp quality just appeared with one of those wands, they're like rainbow that are sparkly, and it just stopped him crying because it was like a young nurse who couldn't get the cannula in, and all of a sudden he laid still and put it in. So I was just like, camp quality are amazing. Let's try and raise money for camp quality because they help, kids with cancer and stuff go, laughter is the best medicine. So I did this idea and I started to promote it. Every time someone donated money, I would film myself plucking the hair out and then send the video back to them just to sort of spread the word. And it got a bit of news and it got on Herald Sun and a few radio interviews and stuff, and we raised a bunch of money. And then I asked the agency I was working for, do you think you would donate some money to the cause? And they're like, nah, we want to enter into awards though. I'm like, well, okay, if you're going to enter it into awards, would you match the amount of money that you're donating, that you're spending on the awards for this charity? Would you match that in donations? And they're like, nah, we won't do that. And I'm like, all the money that you're spending on entering into awards could be going to a charity and actually helping people. Isn't that not the better thing to do? Well, that's the battle of working at an agency, because awards are so important for all their KPIs and stuff. But I just think for the betterment of the world, I'm like, if it's a charity campaign, just give the money to the charity. Yeah.
But I would have thought that if I am an agency, yes, awards matter, but wouldn't the overtness of a campaign like that be more valuable for bringing in awareness of the brand?
Well, that's what I would have thought as well. So that's the sort of thing with agencies that I find that they're so focused on, a lot of them winning awards, that the actual, whether it worked or not, is secondary sometimes.
Yeah, because I would think as a business and as a buyer of marketing and ideas, it wouldn't, like, who gives a shit about the ideas? Because that doesn't mean you're going to perform the same for them. They could come to you with a terrible idea that's not going to win awards. Who cares? Like, the awards for the agency, not the client. It's sort of like this mismatched. It's sort of like the funds management industry, how it gets mismatched over time. And then you get organizations like Vanguard that crop up where they're just like, well, here it is. It's pretty much you get access to this thing anyway, and it's cheaper for you. And it costs like 1/10 of the price of what you'd pay this fund manager or whatever to manage your money in the market. I've never understood that, having not come from the industry, this obsession with awards.
Well, I also think, from what I can tell, like, awards are a good way to reward people without having to pay them more money, potentially. But I'm not sure, because I've never got into that position where I was a big ECD at a place, because I can't do all the politics. It's not me. I was not a great person manager. I like coming up with the ideas, and that's the weird thing in advertising, that often the greatest creatives get promoted to a position where they're in meetings all the time. They're not doing the ideas anymore. I feel like that's a waste. So I felt like I was wasting my time pretending that I was a people manager, and I was bad at it. So I'll stop doing that and I'll just work for myself. Well,
I had a sense that's how you felt, because if you look at like your rise, you worked as a copywriter, then you became a sort of associate creative director, then creative group head. I think that time at DDB may have been the time where you worked out that managing people may not be for you, because after that, when you're at GPATs, it goes to senior writer. And sort of, I was thinking then and there, like, okay, he's, as an ideas guy, this makes a lot of sense. That might have been the inflection point where he realized, actually, I just don't like being an executive. I just really like working on ideas.
Yeah, that's what I really like doing. But then you still end up getting promoted above what you want to do. But you kind of just playing the game. Like, that's what you're
there's stuck in the system.
There's not many 50-year-old senior writers going around. Like, if you're not an ECD, you're going to be stuffed. And I kind of could see that I wasn't great at it. That's why I decided to sort of take a step out of big agencies and stuff and try and do my own thing. So I would build my own brand that's slightly left of center of doing a typical advertising career, I guess, and try and activate social good causes and projects and stuff that I'm passionate about, because that'll make me different to other people. But also, more importantly, I enjoy it, and I'm probably better at it than doing all that stuff, because I believe deeply in the things I work in now, rather than I've got this brief, I'm getting paid all this money, I better do this thing, even if I don't really have a passion for it. But you have to get on with it, because you're getting paid money to do it. So you got to do it.
I want to jump to, because I notice a lot of the things about your biggest campaigns, particularly the Future Landfill campaign, is, I guess I'd say, the overtness of it. Like, they're often very thought provoking. I don't know if there's like an element of comedy peppered in it, but in most cases, like, they're striking. So I guess for you, where they're overarching persuasive principles that you've always thought about integrating into campaigns?
I think if you like the Future Landfill thing, like, it could have been very easy to just be really angry and shocking with stuff, but we decided to make it look beautiful then with the dark, sinister undertones. So I think there's always, it's the old sugarcoating something. So that's what I feel like I'm quite good at, is coming up with things that people will want to pay attention to, and then they'll have a look at it, and then I'll start to think about it a bit more deeply. So I try to do things where it's not all immediately obvious like that. It's something you have to get your attention, but then draws you in, and you have to start thinking. So that's the key to the things that I like to do now, is just make people think rather than spoon feeding everything. I think it's because if you get people thinking about it, then it's a two-way deal rather than just being yelled at and going browbeaten. You must think this. No, here's an idea. do you believe in it? You have a think about it. And I feel like it's going to be more powerful because then people will have buy-in to an idea that maybe they might not have been interested in if you'd have just presented it in a way that wasn't beautiful or it wasn't funny or it didn't have that sort of depth to it. So I like to try and do something with a bit of depth in it. And because often the client is me or my mates, we can do it properly. And I found that's been interesting when we've just done these projects, how successful they've been without spending millions of dollars, like often more successful than projects I've done where they've spent hundreds of thousands and millions of dollars because we've been able to keep it pure and hasn't been, oh, can you just change this? Can you just change that? Can you just change that? And by the time you've done that 3 or 4 times, it's just like it's a shell of an idea and it's just a waste of time.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Well, I think with the future landfill campaign, right, it costs you $35 for the domain and then basically just your time.
Yeah, basically, exactly.
Yeah.
And just working with amazing people who are into it, who I trust and respect, who I've worked with before. It was so cool. Like, Tom Whitty is a genius who I met through going to my wife put me up to go on a panel at Australian Film, Television and Radio School, a writers panel. So I met Tom Whitty, who was then the managing editor of the project. Then he was EP of Australia Talks, which was on last year on ABC TV. He's a genius. So we just hit it off. So I talked with him. Photographer Stu Morley, who I work with, I met through Tom as well. Retouchers and stuff who I've worked over my career. Just people, you just gather these people over your time if you just are open to interesting people and interesting things.
If you were to think about the leaders that you respected when you first got into this industry, and this may have been people that primarily you were reading about, to the people now that you respect, who are they? And the example I might use for myself is like, I was fascinated by propaganda. Like at uni, I was just like, wow, this is a thing, right? And then you'd read about people like Edward Bernays, you'd read some of the work of Noam Chomsky, and you start to get an idea as to how messaging works. But then you actually start to find people that are living the here and now and how they go about that. So I guess for you, how did that change over time? Where did it start and where has it sort of come to now?
Well, I guess I started getting into this industry. All of my creative heroes were probably advertising people. So just because I would go look through the copybook and go, oh, there's David Abbott, there's Paul Arden, and there's all these people. But now none of my heroes are in advertising at all. Yeah. Like they're so far, all my heroes are now, people like Tom Whitty and people I deal with, like Darby Hudson is an amazing poet. I think he's so incredible. My wife is a hero for me because she's opened my mind up to seeing that the universe is where you need to align the right energy in the universe, because I was always so competitive in advertising, because advertising is so competitive and that competition is bad for creativity. So I've changed from having creative heroes in advertising to definitely much broadening my horizons into lots of people who are doing lots of different things. I think are really interesting. I mean, obviously you talk about your Elon Musk type people who's clearly a complete nutter and a megalomaniac, but I mean, all the interests are so completely different. I just think that's so amazing. I just think people who don't just do one thing, I think are really good. Like I like to do lots of different things. People who have got multi-talents, I think that's really interesting because then you're more interesting because you've got lots of things to talk about. Like I'm terrible at networking, but if I can talk about talking about ideas is my networking. So it's not about me. It's talking about something that could be cool. I can talk about that forever, Yeah,
I think you're right about having people that you look up to that are outside of the industry. I mean, that is life. That's what makes someone good at advertising. I've never really had people specifically in the industry that I've modeled myself on, apart from people that I try to talk to day to day. It's funny you mentioned Elon. I think the other day he said he wanted to fight Johnny Depp in a cage match, which was
he's having a good time.
He's having a good old time. That's for sure. I want to jump back to agency structures because I want to be a bit selfish about how we build our own agency and learn from your own experience as someone who is a creative and became frustrated with the structures of those businesses. Who do you think, like in that type of organization, is the true quarterback today? Is it the strategist, or is it the creative director, or the writer? Or is there any one person that you think teams should be modeled or molded around?
Well, I think it needs to be the creative director type person, because everything that we produce needs to be creative in the end. No one's ever going to know what the strategy was. No one's ever going to know how good the account servicing was if the idea that gets made at the end isn't any good. So I think you need to be led by the creative director, and you need to have a creative director who's very empathetic, who doesn't tell people exactly what to do. Like my favorite creative director was Ben Coulson, because it's interesting. A lot of people who worked in account service and strategy and stuff, not big fans of Ben Coulson when I was working with him, because he wasn't really around that much, and he didn't ever work day to day on stuff. But he was, what's that thing they call the helicopter view, that old stereotype voice? Like he was that, because he would not be around that much. When you saw him and you gave him an idea, he would think about every idea really deeply and go, maybe you could do this, maybe you could do that, and always improve it. Whereas a lot of creative directors, you give them ideas and they'd be like, next, maybe you just need to work a bit harder. I'm like, well, that's not helpful. So just having a CD who's empathetic and thinks about every idea can set the tone for doing great work. But yeah, it's hard because I'd never really super fit in to an agency. I don't think. So I just think, if it's not being led by a creative person, I think your work's never going to be as good as it could be. And I think, no matter how good what's CRM and all those sort of things, like I want to be able to talk to people and say, this week we made this, and they're like, oh, that thing's really cool, I love it, rather than we were able to we meet these KPIs. I'm like, I'm not interested in that stuff. I want to do stuff that people go, oh, that's interesting, I want to talk about that because it's got some depth. Again, depth. So I think you need to have depth. In your leader, and it's not just about doing necessarily what the client wants, but it's doing what's the right thing. And that can sometimes be a difficult conversation, because sometimes clients are very specific on what they want. Sometimes that's not the right thing, and that's why you've hopefully got an agency, because otherwise, that's why I was always in agencies. Like, why does this client even bother having us as an agency? Just do it yourself. That's fine.
Yeah.
They could save a lot of money if they did it themselves sometimes. But so you just need to have people that can help people understand that doing something really interesting is going to be is a good thing.
From your perspective, you've worked as an independent, but you've also worked at independent local agencies and the big network-based agencies.
Yep.
I mean, for me, it's sort of obvious that the differences are that networks offer scale and they have the best clients, and independents often have the room to come up with these great ideas. I don't know if that's just an assumption on my part, but what do you sort of see as the key value of independence?
I guess hopefully being able to do things that the big ones can't, because sometimes the big agencies have all these clients that preclude them from potentially doing stuff that's good for the world sometimes, because they'll have, a big client that is a petrol station, so they would never be able to do future landfill, for example, because you can't say you're, stand for the environment when you have your petrol as one of your main clients, So perhaps that's sort of thing that. But also you can hopefully offer something that's maybe more localized and specific, I think, because sometimes big agencies get caught up in, I've got the New York, we have to answer to New York and they want all these awards. So come on, boys and girls, let's get the award ideas happening now. So maybe something like that.
Okay, interesting. Yeah, I thought it'd be around ideas, because my perspective as an outsider is that a lot of the time, some of the craziest ideas come from independents because they're not restricted, and they're not, I guess, they're not as restricted as others based on the accounts that they're working on.
I think but that's the thing. There's so many amazing people working in big agencies. Like, there's so many talented people. And I just wish it's like big agencies would allow them to sometimes have the time to do stuff that isn't for one of their clients. Because I can just imagine some of the solutions that would come coming up to these problems they would do for could be amazing. I just would love people to not have to work 60, 70 hours a week in a big agency and just have enough time to put some of their genius into other things. But you can see, I mean, that's sometimes some of the ideas that come out of big agencies for, social good is often amazing ideas. But yeah, just then if you were an independent, then maybe you could work on it for years longer and make it a real thing rather than an agency. You're probably onto the next thing already. You know what I mean? Like with the book, I've been able to do a book in an agency. If you do a book, you probably do it and that's done. And you got to do another thing where I'm like, well, this can be my career path, is developing this as a book, as a workshop, as a thing, as it can grow on and bigger and help more and more people. So perhaps as an independent, you've got that ability to maybe go a bit deeper potentially.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing I liked about what you've done with the Right Brain Workout. I was just reading this book, actually. I've got to update my notes. Perennial Seller by Ryan Holiday. And it's really interesting how he talks about the creatives that continue to develop this idea, let's call it the Right Brain Workout, as a book, an audio book, a program, this, that, and it becomes better and better over time. And that makes you a perennial, well-known creative because you're perfecting this thing. Yeah. He was talking about how, because a lot of the work he does now is with authors because he's like a marketer who writes books, right? So he's worked with Stephen King and a few others on book releases, and it's really interesting about how he always talks about you just got to get on to the next thing, whether it's the next iteration of the Right Brain Workout or whatever. Yeah,
you've always got to be improving stuff. You can never rest on your laurels, that's for sure.
Of course, yeah. I think this whole COVID period has given me a lot of time to think about strategy in the future, and I think it's given a lot of people the time to think about what that looks like for themselves. You said before, the first probably month or so, work would have vanished into thin air. So how have you started to think about your future? What does the next sort of decade look like for you?
Well, it's all hopefully based around turning the Right Brain Workout into much more than a book. So we're talking about Hard Hat and Dan Monheit, we're trying to develop it as a digital version. So it would use all the technical abilities of a phone and using that to unlock all those things in creative to try and do that. Trying to do a podcast, got TV show ideas, got all sorts of ideas to try and be beyond. I really like working on advertising and social good things, but I would hopefully like to be in 10 years' time kind of just being seen as the guy, he's the Right Brain Workout guy. We need to get his help on unlocking this thing for the world in some way. So I'm trying to get to a point where people are kind of coming to me for my expertise rather than just being another creative person coming up with ideas. So I kind of want to do something that has a bigger impact. It's kind of hopefully trying to have a good example to my kids that, you can try and do something that's good for the world and, enjoy doing it and put something good into the world. Yeah.
Well, when this idea flourishes into some sort of course or program, whatever you develop it into, I'm sure Dan or yourself will hit me up to try it out.
We've just started doing workshops. So we actually did one for PwC.
Okay.
3 weeks ago, then we did another one with 500 people at PwC just as tests. So it's all seemed positive. So we're going to start to actually offer that to the public coming up in the next, hopefully, month or so, because you can just do it. You can do it via the internet and stuff. So we worked on that quite hard to make that start to happen. So we can help people, just everyday people or companies or agencies or whoever, just to think a bit more creatively and have some fun in their day,
All right, I'm going to jump into some rapid fire questions for you to finish things off. Now, during this whole lockdown period, things have obviously changed, but some things may have become more permanent. What has sort of been your go-to item in the fridge over this whole period?
Cheese, always cheese.
What type?
I have all sorts of different types. Feta is my favorite. Feta with some cashew nuts. Oh my God, it's my downfall. Yeah.
Yeah, I would say cheese as well. I've been getting back into Gouda and Jarlsberg.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Some old school stuff.
Yeah, some old school stuff. If you were to think of sort of something under $200 that you purchased before or during the period that's helped you a lot during lockdown, what would it be?
We have a think.
And it can't be AirPods.
No, I haven't got AirPods. I'm still tethered. Under $200. What would I bought? Oh, I have to have a think about that.
What about your microphone?
Yeah, I was going to say the microphone, but it has been really. I was thinking that holding it because it's right in my hand, but it has helped with the podcast and just learning about that stuff's been interesting. But even just my training runners, because I do a lot of gym workouts and stuff. So having some decent runners has been good instead of my shoes that I've owned for 6 years that are falling apart. So that's been helpful.
Yeah, I need to get some new runners. I feel like mine are like 3 years old now.
Yeah.
I'm not a runner,
Yep.
so I don't. They don't get worn down too easily.
Oh no, I've actually thought of something. I have thought of something. Sorry for that long delay. I've never liked tea and tea bags, but my wife has discovered this tea that's like tea you actually put in a spoon and put in a strainer. Yeah, changed my life. I now love tea. I'll have like 6 cups of tea a day nowadays.
What type of tea?
It's called. It's just like it's different ones. It's Slim by Nature is the brand. It's like a detox type tea, but it's just got herbs and stuff in it, and it's amazing. It's changed my life. It's amazing.
Okay. Yeah. All right. Last question for you. If you were to think of a doco, a movie, a TV show you've been watching during this period, what would you recommend and why?
Ozark, always Ozark.
Yeah.
So good. Just there's everything about it is amazing. It's so dark. It's so well acted. It's so well made. It's just brilliant. It's just amazing show.
Oh, when did the second season come out?
I think up to the 3rd season now.
So the latest season.
Yeah, it came out during lockdown.
Lockdown, that's right.
I think it did.
Yeah, because I remember we probably watched that within a week.
Yeah,
like it was done within a week. It's a very, very good show.
Yeah, it's amazing.
Look, Alex, thanks for coming on.
That's okay. No worries. Thanks for having me.
Where can people find you and what you're doing on the interwebs?
You just Google me on LinkedIn. Do you Google people on LinkedIn? Just Alex Wadelton or rightbrainworkout.com.au or stuffbyalexwadelton.com has all my strange ideas up there. Yeah. And I just wanted to say as well, I feel like I've maybe bagged a bit on advertising. I don't mean to do that, but because it's given me so much in my life and it is such a great industry. But I've just sort of moved on a little bit because I could see that there's not many 50-year-old creative people who aren't ECD. So I was actually thinking I need to do something that makes me get out of the machine because I'm not great in the machine. So I'm trying to do this. I'm trying to get there. But all you ad people, you're all amazing. Don't worry about that. But I'm not necessarily as good at surviving in a big agency as a lot of people are.
Do you know, it's funny you mentioned that because I remember through all the people I've interviewed in the industry, everyone has that sort of love-hate relationship with the industry. And I remember texting Dan like the other week because we're on some pitch and I said, fuck, I love this industry and I fucking hate it. Yeah, it's one of these things that it's both wild and painful at the very same time.
Lots of ups and downs. Like I think like there's no better feeling than coming up with an idea and you're just like, yes, that's awesome. And then 3 days later, it's in front of the client and you're just like, this is the worst. This is the worst. And then the next day you're like, I've come up with another idea. That's amazing. So you're like that all the time, which is a good thing. But eventually I was just like, I like to make the things that I thought were great rather than not getting them made.
And I think that's the same thing that Ethan said. Eventually it can weigh you down, or certain types of people at least. Yeah. Look, we'll make sure we link everything. Alex, thank you so much for coming on. I'm glad Dan was able to make the intro.
He's a good man.
And he's a very good man. And thanks for coming on.
No worries. Oh, I forgot to mention the Right Brain Warm-Up is my podcast as well.
The Right Brain Warm-Up. That's it.
There you go. So
we'll make sure we link all that. But
awesome.
Alex, Watto, thanks for coming on.
Thanks for having me on, George.
Thank you so much for watching Uncommon and this week's episode. If you like it, smash that like button. If you want to keep up to date with what we're doing, please do subscribe. We would love that. We'd love to build this audience that we're growing here of uncommoners. If you want to keep up to date with audio, you can search for us on all of your good podcast apps. It's Uncommon or Uncommon Show will typically find us. For social, you want to see behind the scenes, this amazing studio that I'm sitting in, just search at uncommon_show. And everything will be there, including our weekly promos. But look, thanks so much for stopping by. Until next time, thanks for watching.